Should we start? Yeah, I think we can get started. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Just before we get started, before I introduce Dr. Sumi, let me do a very quick reminder because the talk is gonna be recorded. So for the online audience, if you don't really want to be seen, so please switch off your camera. Thanks. Okay, so I'm very glad to have Dr. Sumi with us today. So let me introduce her with you guys. So Dr. Sumi is a reader in discourse analysis at University at Edinburgh, and her research explores the digital literacies of multilingual children and social media through the lens of multimodality. And she's an editor for Functions of Language and serves on the editorial board of Reading Research Quarterly and the convener of Basic Language and New Medium. And she also a member of the International Collective of Research and Design in Children's Digital Books. Please join me in welcoming Sumi.
Thank you. Helen, for inviting me and for the wonderful day. If you have noticed my today's talk, I have belonged to children from early childhood. You've probably heard of that title. It's from a book of Emil Mitchell, although I think she used it metaphorically, and as a literist, I tried to use it in a more literal sense. And I didn't use the word migrant children, but children on the move. And I see why that is, and that also reflects on thinking when I think about studying children in a global context, especially those for the new generation of migrants from China, which is the mainland China. I remember when I was first invited to give this talk, I had a look at the website and what the centre actually do. And I noticed this quite interesting sentence. First, as a discourse analyst, I'm fully aware lots of things put on website is a promotion. But this sentence does struck me because in the last few years, there's a wave for organization across UK university, and colleagues and I have been thinking, what does that mean from educational and research point of view? And this really resonates with me, especially as a Chinese researcher who actually just started to research into phenomenon of community in the last few years. Is that idea that we are not just using a Western discipline lens or knowledgeable understanding to study a phenomenon that is in the East or less developed, or the South, probably a better term, the global South. But the idea that by understanding a different types of practice and structure, it is contribute to knowledge as a whole, not just better for mining. So I don't know how many of you in the room are migrants or online are migrants. I think migration is one of the core issues for global society in general, and I think this issue will be significant change in the next 20 or 50 years due to global warming, and we also have two wars going on. Children and families and I myself, of course, I am just an expert, as the rest of the people are migrants, because I was migrant to Australia first, and then took 2 years for fellowship in Denmark, and then joined Edinburgh back in end of 2019. So the reason I talk about children on the move, exactly the idea that migration is no longer a static state where people move to a place, but with the global movement of the restructuring of the industry and the restructuring of the social, the restructuring of the different industry, for instance, the digital and the IT industry. People have different type of new pattern in the last few years. And this is particularly clear in the community of Chinese speakers, as we'll see later. And the population particularly look at is slightly different from general study of migrants, I specifically focus on children under 8. So I can't actually find stats for that particular range, but there is a stats that says there's 36 million children in 18 are migrants, and that is about 13% of the total migration population. And migrant and refugee probably fill the part of within classroom, but I think UNESCO hasn't updated data since 2018. I have a feeling it hasn't increased in the last few years. And the world. And the OUCPs in the Western European countries, maybe 1 in 5 students are first or second immigrants. And UK, I think the number is about 1.7 million. And that is really significant. Well, of course, I'm a linguist. What I'm not interested in is not just children as immigrants per se, and children as migrants has been got lots of attention in the past, I think, 5 or 10 years in human geography, as well as early childhood, as a phenomenal study. What I'm most interested in is the language and literacy of children. And if you're familiar with the literature, because I don't have a good idea who the audience are, so you probably will have been approaching this particular topic from one of the main theoretical or methodological perspectives. For instance, English as additional language learning, where you'll be looking at national policy across many English-speaking words like Australia, Canada, United States, and how this policy will impact on classroom practice. And there's a lot of research on teachers' ideology, especially challenging their monolingual norm and methodology in a classroom setting. And the other approach you can take that heritage language learning and looking at first or second generation migrant children and how they maintain their family home language, which they tend to experience language losses in the first 1 to 2 years of their schooling, and that figure is quite consistent across at least all English language speaking words. And you can, of course, approach it from a social cultural perspective, but you can also approach it probably from a precision point of view, which is engineer X research approach here. And the next 2 approaches, I think the audience is more familiar with, because they're largely a social culture approach. You can look at how American families carry out their family language planning, and I wonder who this person is, I want you to, and how parents' visible language ideology impact on students' children. And another approach probably plays more focus on the language speakers themselves. There is more lingual and translingual perspective, where we look at how speakers combine different resources in the language as well as the dominant language, and creatively using English countries. I quoted the Ria and Garcia's new application because it has the word decolonization on the title. I think they were trying to argue that is not just a research approach to understand children's education, multiplication, it's also part of decolonization. And I think my ambition was probably slightly less see. But you will be surprised to find out that I'm actually not trained in any of these particular traditions. And I entered this particular topic by accident, and I'm going to approach it, and I have been approaching it from an early childhood education perspective, as well as the perspective of technology. I will probably come back later and explain to you why I landed on this particular topic and why I think it really was exploring as not just a project that is interesting people in education, but has really brought interdisciplinary implications. So the first thing I want to summarize, if you have noticed, I cheekily put everyone on the slides with the Chinese heritage name. it's not a decolonization project. I have to say there are other heritage languages being studied, the Polish, Spanish, is the most written languages in the literature. And there are also Spanish literature on that particular. It's because I'm going to Central Chinese text based. So regardless, and the other thing I want to highlight here is regardless what is the heritage of the researchers, even as myself, we largely actually approached the issues of heritage language from the perspective of a country where they take immigrants, like the immigrant countries. And of course, the word heritage is already coded from this particular perspective of the largely the rich Westerns. And one of my goals in my talk today is really what I'm trying to invite you to reimagine. If we don't take the perspective of the West, or the UK, or Australia, how do you approach the issue of not heritage language, because it's not a heritage language and practice of this language? I'll actually make it clear, I don't have the answer to it. My task today is really, it is really a project worth pursuing. So what I'm going to do is now to show you how I landed in the project I'm doing. So now it's and it just doesn't work so well with the audience today, because most of you actually speak Chinese. Usually with my other colleagues, I usually ask, what is happening on with you know, if you reach Chinese, it really doesn't work. And is there any non-Chinese? Okay, so you have been tried. What is going on? I tried to do quite a lot of different audiences with my students. There were two people who figured out. Okay. No, not quite. Anyone in our audience online?
I love you.
There is a bit of I love you, but that's still not the main action happening.
Something to do with the baby. Something happened to the baby. They're showing that the baby has done something.
It's embarrassing.
It's embarrassing.
It's a sticker. It's like a picture kit.
Make your own stickers from your own child.
They just like people like mother bloggers, their baby online and this So surprisingly, what actually happening here is they are playing a paper scissors game.
Ah, now it makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is what actually happened. So, and this is the data I collected in London. I think, I'm not actually. So the reason why I started that project is not actually interested in this particular type of practice. Say, at the time I was doing my first postdoc project, and I had this opportunity in my fellowship where I can do overseas project. So the first part of my project, which was on children's reading apps and the activity, and that was around 2013 and 14. And if you remember, if you have ever worked as a child teacher, that was the thing. So I don't know whether it's the UK, Australia, it's about taking iPads into classroom and explore children's literacy or science and reading. And that was the first part of the project. Then I got an opportunity to do the second part, and I hadn't quite figured out what kind of multimodal practice. I'll tell you the story later, but so what I ended up doing is a small graphic study in east of London, southeast. So it's which I call the grammar school border of London and Kent. This large section of Chinese parents are living there. And I ended up working with 9 families, and it's also a collaborative project with Professor Rosie George, who was IOE at the time, but she now moved to MMU, so that's Metropolitan Manchester University. And that explains the child perspective, and I was very grateful because lots of fieldwork tricks working with young children is meant to like this group. And I work with 9 families with 12 children under 8 in Southeast Asia. And the question we are actually interested at the time is how do we maintain their family's heritage language and culture through digital media? Okay, and we did interview, I did interview, participation, I did some video recording on business. So the data you just see, so this is the family sample, and that is quite important. I would like specifically like to draw your attention to the composition of the family demographic background, because I think when we study bilingual children, we tend to get towards a mother who has a very high degree of father also professional. But I somehow, by luck and by assistance, as you'll see, managed to come across a quite diverse space to be homeschooled, quite mixing, and quite diverse social background. Although not for mother's education, that's because of migration policy. So the mother had to come to UK, DNA to stay. But this is a that diverse. I think family 8, which I will revisit, which is I call it standard data for migrant children study. Question always is accusation. And the data you have just seen, the playing paper, rock, scissors comes from this particular family, right? Which have father who actually speaks is a Portuguese, European Portuguese speaker, but he does not speak Portuguese at all, because he believes it's a less profitable language. That's quite typical in literature as well, that the economic status of a language, how well the language is maintained in the family. And the webs on that screen, so the software you have just seen, I think lots of people is WhatsApp. WeChat, I think at the time of my research, it's actually the most popular social media in the world. Although the number increased, actually ranking lower is because of TikTok. What I'm doing now and when I did field work, and it is a very unique sort of Chinese sort of language social media, where it organizes social activity quite differently from this. In fact, one of the things is they tend to be anonymous. Video-based instruments. So how did I land it in this data set? Let's wind it back a little bit. It's not going to be a standard search. I thought last year my PhD invited some of my colleagues, and one of them actually did a talk about everything she did during the process, especially fieldwork. Students found very helpful. I'm trying to do that a little bit as well, because lots of our research are invisible. We don't write up, we don't write the messy methods. We didn't write the failures, so the students kind of almost really helpful. So why did I land it in London into that particular project? Because one day I was doing a literature review and I was reading that particular application. It's called Let's Do Some Jumping Together, original participation in the use of mobile technology. So basically, it's about how grandparents young children overseas. Right? And this particular grandmother is located in the UK, and their family migrated to Australia. And she was trying to get connected with the younger daughters, Lily, who was 5 at the time. And what she did is she will have these 5 talks with her, and she calls them, so it's her own grandchild. And when I goes through the data, so what she was trying to show in her project is children's play, the ability to do imaginary play and music language. And that is very critical for first language development at that particular point, language. And this is a very simple talk. I think she probably cleaned out somehow. As a discourse analyst, I just don't want to conversation go that smoothly, but that's not the point. So what attracted me at that time is the middle section of this conversation. So he said, because you can't walk, what the baby said. And the grandma said, well, can't walk, because you haven't got legs. And the grandfather said, really? And why haven't we got any legs? Because your legs are moving. So if you're an adult, you can understand. You see someone on the iPad, and then you have the top body of them, and you think they don't have legs, but you somehow can't understand what legs are under the iPad. The reason this really fascinates me is because I am trained as a discourse analyst who specializes in multimodality, especially visual modality. So I'm known as the selfie woman anyway. Just get the picture as but that's what I do. Why is that quite interesting from both linguistic and language development point of view and visual modality is the children is actually struggling with symbol or image and the materiality. We're still trying to figure out when we see visual things, symbolic representation of view on the screen and the real material. And she somehow understands there is a link, but somehow she couldn't fully develop it. And this is also interesting because in early language development, what is very difficult for young children is to develop decontextualize. So decontextualize the talk is being able to talk about things that beyond what you're doing in the immediate environment. So you recall what happened yesterday, or you make up a story about future because you don't have reference in your surroundings to create that even narrative. So I thought, interesting. There's something going on there because of the increasing visual representation. Maybe I can hack into. So like any young, naive researcher who just finished her PhD, so I did a very extensive literature review and see what is the gap I was actually tapping into at that time. So there was three only emerging around the same time in the student research. So the first is in the heritage language literature, we start to see more and more reporting of parents actually using digital resources in their digital language practices. But it wasn't really clearly described what they are because they usually do surveys. So the references has to be digital books, only referenced, and apps. YouTube at that time is also something used, but that's mostly for, I think that time is mostly for learning English for EL. And the other thing is quite interesting is the other reason there is missing literature on that time is, as you know, in the West, social media age is 13. Right? So people just assume younger children are not on social media yet. But my colleagues in digital literacy and the childhood start to show them by doing extensive field-based research with children across Europe. That young children actually do activities, and as we'll see later, this always takes mediated by parents. Okay? And the other thing which is starting showing is the study of older children, people who are above 13 and adolescent, and their uses of text messaging and Facebooks, and how they use a mix of language resources on these social media. So, interesting. I'm going to do this. This is something new, and there's something interesting for me theoretically. And I'm pretty sure I've had myself on the back and think you're a genius, but reality, Waterfront, right? When I landed in London, first, and you're familiar with ethnographic study, you can understand, you can't just helicopter yourself into a nation and trying to build a community of researchers just because you somehow speak Chinese. So, but anyway, I'm not going into that story because it's not the main point of this project. But in the second trip, I managed to adjust my field method. What I did that time is carried in a Chinese school, which is quite new, I think, 2014, in east of London, the southeast, slightly more north than the people who live. I think it's up here. Most of the building now it's back here. There was a Saturday school, so I stayed there for about 8 weeks, with talking to parents and doing, if you know them, things quite standard field method. And during the field work, I started worried because the parents started to describe. So I did some initial interview as well. So the parents told me to use WeChat. They're very infrequent and they're very insubstantial as well. You know, they're very brief, not just greetings and then they move on. Okay, so that's really worries me. I think if you're only it's not like the business or data, it worries me as leaders because especially as a multimodal analyst, what you want is video data. That's what I want. And if they tell me there's no video data to record, it's just enough what I'm going to do. Okay. So I actually look further, I'm trying to figure out why is that there are not many activities going on. So they gave us a few, I analyzed the interview and there was a few themes emerge. So the first thing is really about children's age, because that's all parental needs. It's not what children say or what I observe. So they say, you know, they're just too young, they're easily distracted, they're hard for them to sit down, and they still come say hello and then move on to this. This is the one common reason I was giving. Relates to children's age. The second thing is, which I think, in reflection, now I'm older, I realize it's a very silly mistake to make that, not realizing the time difference between China and Australia, London and China is very different, and the fact parents with young children have very busy schedules. And it's very difficult to coordinate and building interviews and the activity. Right. So these are the things that I can't control. And then I observed there are two other themes actually emerge. So one of the themes is they feel that because they don't live together, they lack conversation topics. Okay, they don't have really much to discuss. Okay. Our children don't have much to talk. So there's no shared life experience, as I said. Young children have difficulty bringing up or decontextualize language. And that's difficult. We know it's the first language, but they all want monolingual. Imagine for L2, for a heritage speaker at that age to be able to talk about things where the parents, where they don't have the shared context, extremely difficult as well. So it's not just a social reason, there's also a linguistic reason why that happens. And the last reason they gave me is actually we only get these children on WeChat because it's something to do for my parents. And because parents as in the grandparents. I'm doing it because my cousins and my families and uncles. That's something how I was doing. And this turns out was the key to actually understand what's going on in these families and young children. So they're always mediated. So young children don't directly engage in these activities, so their activities mediated by mother's perspective of what's going on. And when mother look at these activities, they don't think, okay, my children is doing Chinese, doing heritage based language practice. What they're doing is just reporting to my parents. And this is also a phenomenon quite widely reported in study of Chinese internal migration of young people using WeChat as a static sort of reporting to their friends and to keep maintaining this temporary unique family relation in China, but that's reported in this study at the time. So I then went on to do home visit to 3 or 4 parents, just something like just basically chatting with our with parents. And when we start to chat more and more details, wow, what actually happens in children's uses of heritage language. Of course, these are the parents who don't use free, but there is one girl in the data set. Her father does say she talks a lot with the grandfather, father, family. And that was the first family I mentioned, the standard family. 5-year-old girl, parents are both from China, come to London to do master, and father went on to become a research scientist, very highly ranking universities. They were both employed as professionals, and the father's father, so paternal grandfather, was a retired professor. And just before my field work, the grandfather felt that she just run out of discuss with grandchildren, and he was really so he started to collect this heritage language material and then send to the granddaughter beforehand, and they started to discuss topics just around these things. And this is quite interesting because this really relates to the point I want to make, which is missing in the contemporary literature in a way that we tend to not see how class resources or the habitats that heritage users accumulate in their home country actually being transferred to the migrant country. And this, even this is really tied to class as well. It's quite fascinating. I do wonder if I had a more standard migrant data, would I have a very different view of this phenomenon as well? So I'll come back to this from your perspective. So now let's go back to remember what happened in Kelly's literature and compare with my family. And I realized that even I, as someone who studies multilingual, was really blinded by monolingual in my own research design and just ignore the most obvious thing, which is Kelly is talking to her children, her grandchildren, who are first language, and they are L1 students. I'm just trying to reproduce a lesson that is about L1 children and talking to their grandparents and directly to language. Although I believe, I kind of like, if you ask me, I'll see language is correct. You promote methodology is kind of being constrained by that particular perspective as well. And the second is she was actually studying her own children, and maybe it's recorded from her perspective. This doesn't make a difference because she was academics and she knows how to do scaffolding for young children as a family from the group 8. This really crossed different language groups. And she knows how to do that. And that's why she gets children engaged. It's not a natural engagement result of scaffolding. And this is really related to family background. And I think this is a phenomenon important modeling in different languages. And the other thing is this methodology. That was the time when we shifted from desktop devices to mobile. And recording desktop devices is not easier than mobile, especially for recording ones. And so after this project, when I moved to Denmark, what I was trying to really do is trying to solve the data capturing issues. Was more that's a different story. I'm not going to get into it here. So now let's go back to what I actually observed in the field with these children. The first, their uses of the social media is episodic. Throughout the day. It's very frequent, but in small chunks of time. In most, it both has to do with the nature of their social practice at their age. The other reason is you're probably familiar with the digital devices as dangerous discourse with parents. It's a huge topic in parenting literature. So parents feel social stress and anxiety actually give children devices for longer period of time. Be normatively sensitive to this point. And the other thing is, they are mediated socialization. The children are rarely, unless it's a terrible news, 3-year-old boy bought 10 million something online using my phone. But the more regular, less sensation uses of digital media, usually mediated by parents. And this is actually reported in other literature. Parents will one of the literature, I think I quoted later, is parents would sit together as parents and children were together as parents and typing on Facebook posts. From our end, as a researcher, we couldn't see the process. The other thing is, they also have a different forms of, so it's very difficult to tease out these invisible data from English. But as I went on, I noticed there are a few quite not prominent way of using these really. Of course, educational apps is one of them, but that wasn't the focus of the study project at the time, so I only put an interview but didn't follow up. And I think it's also the European situation is quite different from Australian situations. Sometimes the school will assign different kind of apps and projects. So for the heritage language, the most frequent data, although I really managed to get a few, is because only 2 parents are willingly to share the village. This is another thing I found out is how Chinese parents are a lot less willing to actually share the village. And we have to stop the recording here. You're not to be allowed to. I mean, you can take it out to people online. Basically, I can show them in closed space, but I'm not sure in public name. So this is the first really frequent type of data. All the parents will probably do that, which is called, I take a video of my children and then send it to my parents to see what they are doing. They usually involve children speaking Chinese. I'm showing 2 of them. Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you. No. Okay. I will quickly explain what he is doing. So they have a textbook from a Chinese school. So the kid is basically reading out this. The second one is actually transcribed, so you will see the transcription later. But we'll show you what is actually happening. So basically, what is happening in this video is the young boy just received a gift for his birthday, and he was trying to explain to his grandparents what this particular gift is. I still haven't figured out what that is because I don't understand that Chinese word, and I couldn't find words in English. And so he explained what he gets. He took out the toy. And what in this video, what you can also hear is mother's voice. So the child sometimes couldn't figure out how to say something or do a word searching, and the mother's voice will come in and they're completely stuck. So this is a very classic sort of show and tell drama you probably heard English speaking school where you bring something to school, then 5 minutes and explain what. Do you do that in the UK as well? Okay, so I think children's just run out of things. I don't know who invented it. Okay, so at the end, we sign off. So I'll show you the transcript. And it is a very fascinating data because in these videos, what the two models do is a very complicated scaffolding of not just language itself, is also the narrative structure. So the child starts with, my mom bought me this thing called the timer. We actually could not figure out what that is. And why have I bought it? So you have a narrative, but the narrative needs a reason, and children hasn't been able to do that, wasn't able to do that. So mother said, why have I bought you? And he said, because I'm a good kid. Okay? And then because it's my 7th birthday, and then he stopped. He couldn't remember. I don't think it's the word he was searching. What he is actually searching is also possibly how to say birthday. It's hard to know what he was searching. So he said, it's your 7th birthday, isn't it? Instead of giving a direct answer, mother construed it as a yes/no answer question. He said, yes, it's my seventh birthday. And then these three things are, they're what informed me by X's, pick the name out. And the mom said, what else? Okay. So, and then this is, and then again, he couldn't remember the Chinese word for that. So he has to link out the frame. It's quite interesting of his using of the camera frame as a narrative devices, and it occurs several times throughout the as well. So he whispers and says, brother in English, and mom said, yes, your brother in Chinese. Again, she doesn't construe it as a word feeling, but use as if he asked a question and fill up the word for him. So in this very short exchange, I didn't show you the full transcript. What we'll see is it's a very complicated use of different resources. Multimodal, so linguistically seen, we have the narrative structure and interaction strategy. Another use is a very typical scaffolding strategy teacher use, rather than give you a direct answer. You position it as a question or affirmation to the thing he said, rather than say not direct or worse things. And so he is learning the narrative structure to give a reason. The other thing is he is learning new vocabulary of communication. What is also fascinating is although he is still developing two languages, he's very good at using the multimodal digital narrative resources that's present to him in the frame. And he really has this awareness, which is quite interesting. I think it might be a generation thing to understand in the visual frame present. Later, when you move out, you're no longer narrating, you have to sit there and ask this question. Luckily not, because the frame sets up the narrative as well. And you see, he also uses the sign of gesture towards the end of the video where towards the end of the video where is a classic sign of gesture of goodbye, link towards and engage sign parents. So what these videos suggest, multimodal research is quite important in learning heritage language development because it can be used to coordinate and build to develop other types of resources at the same time. Although they are not necessarily competent in either language, they are very competent to communicate by combining these different resources together and narratively make it coherent. Okay. And what is really interesting is these parents are doing this scaffolding, but the kids are not aware of them because they think what I'm doing is I'm just recording this video for my grandparents. That's it. These are what I call the invisible practice. That's very difficult to tease out from the adults' perspective. Okay. So what unusual set of data is the one I collected. I don't think it's a typical type of practice. I think it really has to do. I don't think it's I don't think this is exclusive to this particular young child, but it's not quite common either because this is a multiple combination factors. What this child does is he used his mother's texting account and text to people on his mother's network in a large cohort of Chinese speakers. So this particular data you're seeing here comes out of a very complicated multi-site, multi-format communication. So what's happening in this particular communication exchange is in China, there's a group of mother's high school friends and they have a face-to-face reunion dinner as well as an online reunion. The reason they need to have online way is just not just for the migrants external, it's also for the internal migrants in China as well. So we already have one side, two forms of communication, online, offline integration. And in London, so the two boys, so that's family 6, I showed you 2 boys, 1 6, 1 8. And the mother was visiting a friend. So the mother had to talk to the friend or texting his friends in China as well, which gets a little bit of distraction halfway through. So he said, why don't you go and talk to them? He passed the phone to the boys, and they start to engage in this dinner conversation. What is really striking about this particular data set is the whole exchange, they actually did it for over an hour. That was quite, and considering the level of Chinese they have at the time. And it's not the Chinese complexity. So if you only look at what they produced in Chinese, so why were they able to do that first? Is really facilitated by the modern these were, acquiring Chinese literacy is quite different from English literacy because the non-phonetic system, where if you learn to read and write letters, it takes a lot of practice. But because in iPads and now as well as computer, you can actually type in the Roman phonetics, phonetic sound of the word, it will turn into text for you. And when the older brother found out that's what his mother did, he learned that. And he was managing to do that, even though he has a very limited range of Chinese characters. This is where technology for me is the written Chinese. And if you only observe what they say in Chinese, it's incredibly simple. Right? Do you think they are very good at Chinese or at all? Basically just said, haha, I'm Xiao Wei. So basically the younger brother said, I'm the little one. That's their nickname. And then said hello in Chinese. And then put some sticker. And then type in ha, which is some laughing in Chinese. And then the brother comes in and said, Xiao Wei know that. So my brother, younger brother, know that. And I am Dao, so I'm the older brother. And then put another sticker. And then he went, hello, maternal uncle, so it's Jun. I'll come back. This is the significance of this particular word in Chinese. And then he typed, I don't understand, was the Chinese out of sentence. And then he went again, I am there. If you just look at Chinese itself, it looks very simple. If you will say, okay, his heritage language competency is not very high. But if we examine it as an interactional sequence, you'll realize the incredible complexity involved in actually sustaining this particular conversation. So this is the first part of the conversation, which in a non-face-to-face communication environment where embodied resources does not exist, you need to understand that you have to signal speakers, especially when using your mother's account. So you have to do that first. You have to swap the conversation flow from one level to another, and this is the interaction awareness. And then you have a very standard established of greeting in the conversation sequence. Xiao Wei wrote that, and Dawei and hello. What is really interesting is picking up this particular word. Rather than outcome, which is a word in construction in Chinese, use generic term. It can be your maternal brother, it can just be any older male on the street, you call them uncle. Instead of use uncle, we use Jun, which is specific term for maternal brother, maternal uncles, and you not actually use it just street. The reason he used that is because his mother's friends. So although it's not necessarily correct, it's very imaginative to do that. What is really interesting is that if you look at what happens in the adult, there are multiple adults and conversation about this point as well. So CM2 is the person parents main interaction, and CM1 drop in. There are two simultaneous conversations you have to manage as well. And CM1 also used, or CM2 also used as idiomatic expression called "Anjias" in Chinese, literally saying, "Are you drinking vinegar?" 吃醋. And the child couldn't pick up the right. So he said, I'm confused. Okay, and this is quite interesting. here as well. CM2 picked up is used of maternal hormones in West. So now we are linked by blood rather than just a very regular old man on the street. Have some relationship actually established by using this, because this term is only used to note kids, not just older adults. Okay? And then he said, I don't understand, because they start to have a conversation here. What is extraordinary? So there's a between here, because this signals internal conversation between these two paths. So if you look at this, I think this is kind of familiar to our everyday texting, texting, especially if they're asynchronous and synchronous during the same time. The conversation are not orderly in online environment, but in face-to-face, we tend to have more order in terms of this reported in this lecture repeatedly. So being able to actually participate in this conversation requires really high level of interactional management. So what is striking is what he did next is the slides we have seen. He has to take the floor, but he has to take the floor using a way that he can do, where is using a modality that he is familiar with, which is the paper rock system. So he invites the adult using the play, saying, let's play a game. And adults, very interesting, quickly picked up the paper and scissors, and the exploding hard is because they both come out of the paper. So that's why it's not love. It's just like, oh, we have the same thing. And then he comes scissor again, and the adult went paper, and then the speaker is baby doing face palm. So I lost. So this is what I'm showing here is not just that he quite imaginatively using emojis for play, is also using that to regain the control of a very complicated disruptive communication in the environment of digital interaction. And so this is one key feature is really this interaction when you examine and purely as a heritage language data. This suggests they are probably in zero development. If you look at translanguaging and a multimodal perspective, what you realize is what they are being very good at is using a range of environment, different types of communication modality and competently managing. And this is very important in the heritage language context, as we see intention, participation, and real life application. So in the language, second language development literature shows that intentional participation really helps when learning. And what they did is they use the resources they are good at to create an intentional environment where they can then participate in to practice their heritage. And this brother is very interesting. They also, because the mother is actually asked sometimes to teach children, not children, undergraduates from Seoul's Chinese. And some of his students from the boy was also from indigenous actors, not just adults in China, and using this method to create the environment he needs for himself to practice, develop heritage. What is also very interesting is in this digital affordance environment, it's just a normal form of socialization, linguistic socialization. So what we see just now is learning how to negotiate social relationships, smart use of children showing the kinship, so negotiate interpersonal relations with adults he never met. There are also different forms of socialization, of cultural socialization. So I think if you're not familiar with WeChat, you don't know what that is. A digital envelope, red envelopes, where you give young children money in holidays, birthdays, and now we have the digital phone. I have a mixed feeling about that. You click and you get some money transferred to you. And so at the end of the conversation, one of the adults saying, okay, I'll give you some envelope, and that was here, and then this little token of affection, and let your mom take you to the hometown to have a look. And it's really interesting what he said here is Thank you, that's enough. It's a really culturally appropriate expression when you get this money. It's a different form of it. You don't say to say it. You have to say that's too much. So this is another form of cultural practice of accepting these red envelopes. Of course, you're very happy, although he's not being there because real money, digital money is moms and hands. So there are multiple forms, not just linguistic socialization, it's also cultural socialization by participating in this process. So this is our research that I was doing, and I'll give some interim conclusions so far. So what it shows is something we already know about language socialization and heritage learning. Lots of these learning and speaking is tied to identity and emotion. We see the importance of sibling socialization because the younger brother was reluctant to do that, but the elder brother showed him how to do that. Willing to give a try, we show the importance of intentional participation and meaningful interaction rather than distracted interaction. And these actually create a void inside. And then if we look at from the point of view of heritage language, what we are looking at is the things that facilitate our digital technology. First is the competency in written and speaking, because these digital media allows you to write in a way that is less threatening than taking a hold of pen, because you can learn characters by choosing from a list of poems, different dietary tones, and really, it really sort of really take away the barriers of being able to write in Chinese, digital technology. That's what digital technologies do. The second thing is, when we think about heritage language, we tend to think about things, you have features, we think about lexical ranges, and all that sort of theory. What this is showing is, they also develop some skills in negotiating very complex interactions as well. And it's different from place to place interaction. And I think this is the type of competence we try to overlook in younger children. Because what we see as language, what we see as a good example of children shows communication, competence, and not necessarily equivalent to intelligence. And this is quite fascinating for me because we just had a colleague who is there during our department. And when you look at communities who doesn't have access to speech, then you realize how important speech is in human communication and how many resources and different structures of language and deaf sign languages can pull out to engage in everything. And the other thing very fascinating is they really have a really wide range, not just linguistics communicated back to also transmodal as well. And these visual models has been used to create the environment they need to participate in meaningful interactions. So this little bit is really what vision technology bring into the picture of heritage language practices in the years. And finally, what I wasn't able to kick up in my project, I wasn't trying to put it right in my project, because I didn't actually pursue that one, is these digital technology, their development really brings a very different access to translation or networks and social cultural resources to the you have written, first Christian has written about this idea of bringing different repertoires, and this is what they really kind of bring into their everyday life. So what you see is the uses of resources, linguistic speakers. We have now extended speakers outside of the non-dominant country where we live. Translation, Chinese speakers, they not necessarily even L1 speak, to languages as well. The other things I put in report in my project, we also read a lot of blogs, motherhood blogs, written by Chinese parents in the UK and parents in China as well. They have access to digital resources where they ask people to bring them to or recommend what do you use in China, what apps do you have in China, what kind of TV your children watch in China, and then they use these and mobilize these resources as suited to go up this way. So what I'm going to do now is to return to this picture and put forward and try to create it. I didn't manage to continue this project because my personal circumstances up in the running over time. When I moved to Denmark, the community is different. It's very difficult to continue that project, especially with my level of fluent in Danish. So when I landed in Edinburgh, the first thing I tried to do is really to establish my links in Edinburgh, which wasn't easy either because the Chinese community is much more scattered. And what also happened was, I joined in 2019, we all know what else happened. What is fascinating for me is my research actually got picked up during the pandemic because children was forced to do that. Because before the pandemic, we also observing field work is not just missing off on the other topic is the newer generation Chinese parents would say, just take them back to China. They will be fine. Suddenly that wasn't possible for a long time. So why do I still want to continue this project? Is it really has implications beyond what we're interested in. So one thing that we look at here is the multi-site online offline communication community. A huge topic both in linguistics and digital communication and sociology of social media as well is this idea of online offline is not actually separate, and then we have to remember this continuity. But when I'm looking into literature, what I've noticed, this is one of the work done by my colleagues, which is working with Polish family in London, is it's methodologically viable for the Polish community because they're in Europe, tends to have very constant concentration, and Polish has a very different social linguistic profile compared with Chinese. It's a very homogeneous and very small as well. So this creates a two question because it does also have a difficulty studying online offline with methodology first, because translation fieldwork is not that possible. Like you can study online offline with Polish community, which is not this one, and especially with adults. But if it was children and grandparents, it becomes difficult. It's a very interesting methodological challenge. And also, I think the Chinese community is unique in that sense. The Chinese social media culture is different, which means it really what we understand as the online space is very different from what we understand as the Polish online space. For one thing, there's no social media that is Polish online, at least doesn't have an international reach the same way that Chinese social media does. And the different diaspora speakers from different parts of Chinese speaking world, as well as different types of migrants across the world, the Chinese community. So this really quite made me think about heritage language really highlights the different, very interesting theoretic issue of diaspora resources in the age of Chinese social media. This really emerged from my study of Chinese diaspora influences during COVID, where they are located in one country, but they are putting together all the information and trying to kind of spread it to other speakers around the world. That's another quite interesting. So when I was locked up, so I'm going to return the key question. When I was locked up, I did think, okay, I'll never redo this project ever again because it was so difficult to assess families, especially with young children when they're very busy. So I just asked myself, what happens if I don't do this research anymore? If I don't do this research in swimming, is it possible there's an even better field site that I can carry out this line of research? And I realized the answer is Shanghai. I'm not sent by the government to promote the city. The reason being, it is one of the cities where It has a very large chunks of migrants. Itself is a migration city. At the same time, it has a lot of immigrants who comes to other English-speaking countries, especially in the last 5 years, for different economic and political reasons. And at the time when I saw it, I really wanted to just, I was reading all the demographies of different cities, major metropolitan cities in the world. And it's really difficult to actually find many other cities of the same composition, whereas maybe New York, the problem with New York is that the music is too complex to actually reach community. And the other thing is, grandparents actually stay in Shanghai. They're easy to access, they're easy to coordinate, and they tend to live as a cluster, which I found out, in a particular community because the economic structure. So, and the other thing I was trying to figure out is it's very difficult to tease out children's heritage literacy from their perspective because the way their days range. But for grandparents, that really stands out. Their communication with their grandparents, children really is the highlight in what we call social empowerment. And the other thing I feel like it can really do, which is missing, and another colleague who's doing bilingualism really want to understand, is the national, called the national context impact. And the usual way is you get researchers from America, you get researchers from Australia, you get researchers from Canada, you get from. But you don't have to. You go to Shanghai, you grandparents, like my mom bought a flat in Shanghai, you can still do it. And there's Canada, US, Australia, and the UK. We have all the actually relatively plastic environment as well. The other reason, and I always do start to think more when I look at these Chinese on YouTube, is what these so-called vision marks, what do these so-called heritage speakers means to the community of Cambodians? Because I've started to observe lots of heritage speakers as bloggers in Chinese speaking, some of them abroad in English to the Chinese audience, to the American audience, and some of them brought in Chinese and introduce what happened in outside. And these discourse actually intersect in a way that we don't see previously without social media. And the other question is really interesting, is when you see it from grandparents' point of view, as I showed earlier, it gives an issue of aging and digital access. If you have more social capital, you better have digital access to your grandchildren, and then you have more chance to help your grandchild develop their heritage and resources as well, and you have the chat. It became an issue of class as well as education access in country of original. And finally, is my only, these are big questions, I can't answer. The last thing is, what's the thing I'm really interested in is when we say translational resources, I'm not really interested in this idea of moving communities using social media and being mobilized in different education platforms. And this is kind of observed quite a bit in the Chinese-speaking social media. I mean, we talk about quite a lot in English-speaking, American culture, mixed landscape in English. It happens in Chinese as well. So that's probably all from me. And I do write up. I mean, so if you are PhD students and who sometimes doesn't have perfect methodology, don't worry, just to write something up about common backgrounds, and it'll be useful for others to learn about them. So sorry, I run over 10 minutes. I was trying to. I thought I didn't put in that.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Sumi. That's very, very interesting. Yeah.